Here is Silverado Trail. This is actually the front of Glass Mountain. You can see. Okay, welcome to the Quest for Details. Today we are looking at a foothill of the Napa Valley in the coastal range of California. It is called Glass Mountain. There's actually a few Glass Mountains here in California, different places where obsidian has intruded into the surface of the earth from volcanoes and other volcanic sources. This particular spot is a layering of volcanic tuff and boulders and pieces cobble of obsidian, making up an entire foothill of a mountain range. The surrounding area is heavily laden with volcanic tuff also, which is layers of volcanic ash that have bedded together and been compressed into basically like a white rock. And in some road cuts along the Silverado Trail in the Napa Valley, you will find 20 to 30 foot tall road cuts, 3-story road cuts made completely out of volcanic ash, bedded ash, formed into tuff. This particular site has been private, mostly private owned the entire time. Throughout the years, being a local to the area, I have had the opportunity to get permissions to hike on some of the areas. Also, I have been a landscaper who tended some of the areas on this mountain. It's referred to as a mountain, but again, it's just a small foothill. So I thought that we would stop, we would take a quick look at it. I am reaching out to some of the property owners. It is really hard to get anyone to talk about this subject because there are all sorts of issues that come up when you start to realize that it is probably one of the largest production sites maybe in North America because of what it is. I'm not aware of others of this scope and scale. It is so close to the San Francisco Bay, you can literally see the bay. If the air was clear enough to, you'd be looking down on what was marshes that used to extend all the way up to Yountville from the North Bay. A lot of the fields that now hold the grapes that you see when you're driving here actually were marshy up to the what was referred to as the Yountville marshes. So you can see how much the land has been drained when you are driving through the region. And that's how close you would be to the San Francisco Bay. You're also in the coastal corridor that peoples would have traveled down literally since the land bridge from Alaska and Russia were connected. And basically, for as long as you are willing to accept that indigenous North American natives were here, this site has been close to the coast, never under ice as far as I'm aware, so it has been prevalent the whole time in the native cultures. It's very obvious, and so many of the dents and stuff on this hillside are literally 10,000-year-old diggings from the Native Americans themselves. Now, we've had fires that literally burnt the entire mountain, so we can go back in time and we can look at the different stages. And literally 10 years ago, it was completely forested. So when you were up on these properties, it seemed like a much bigger mountain. Now, as you're coming up to it, it's basically a grassy knoll. And the amount of development since is mind-boggling, and that's occurring everywhere because when things are burnt to the ground, it's much easier to develop. And of course, people have to develop because everything was burnt to the ground. So we can look at some of the changes. These are right after the fires and right before the fires. So I just felt like it was time for me to go ahead and tell what I know about this site and show you what I have found over the years. These are delicate and sometimes controversial subjects because of the ownership of original land by the indigenous and the now current private landowners, but it's a prime example of The development of the entire West Coast, which is one of the most inhabited civilized areas of our pre-European history, and this being such a large site, and what I'm about to show you in this video that I've found in these areas, is enough for me to warrant that it's worth going ahead and telling the story before it's completely gone and completely erased, because so many things are actually literally under structures and roads and everything else right now. I'd like to always remind everybody that all of the land, especially the areas near water and natural resources, were all inhabited areas, and everything that you see built on it by anything post-European is obviously, without any argument, all built upon land that was previously occupied. So we need to keep that in mind. We need to at least pass on the knowledge and the history. So please keep that in mind. All that I intend on doing with documenting these sorts of sites and spots on the quest for details is just simply let the knowledge exist, let it continue to exist. We watch so many things in so many places on this planet disappear because literally between generations and generations the knowledge is lost. So this is why we quest for details.
Here is Silverado Trail. This is actually the front of Glass Mountain. You can see the white volcanic tuff. You can see that's what the ground is made out of. And all these black pieces are pieces of obsidian. And as you climb over this hill, you can see as we're closer to it, it looks bigger. See, that's how forested it used to be. And there's diggings almost as big as this next dent here. And in that, everything in there will have its crust broken off of it. And you can find obvious toss downs all through it. That's literally what the gravel here is. And just to give you an idea, this is the level. All of that is obsidian. All throughout the whole thing. Yeah, be careful. As you come around the corner, people have dug in this, of course, over the years. There's pockets there. This is where big pieces have slid away and fallen down. And you can see what you're dealing with. And so this is all the volcanic glass, the obsidian. You can see that they had massive sources. I think this is from everybody digging on it. It's become like totally unstable. I see pits up there, huge boulders. And yeah, I think that the site should be looked at here and there because of the napping sites, of the manufacturing sites. It's one of those things that the locals were all aware of it, but as time passed, less and less people are, so I get worried about it. These are all just natural shapes. Really pure stuff compared to what's up at Canocti and stuff. These are all just perfect nuggets. Again, it's got really 100% less bubbles, flaws, inclusions into it, so makes nice stuff for working. You can see it up there. That's what all the different layers are. All through here. And I've known that my whole life, but then I got on a couple of properties and I realized that as I was picking up the pieces like this, that like 40% of what I was picking up was a toss down or a blank, which was pretty crazy, but it makes sense because we're within sight of the San Francisco Bay and the coast, and so anybody who ever needed volcanic glass for 10,000 years came here and chipped on it and threw pieces down. And you see the ground is actually shiny with it here. So this is right by Glass Mountain Road off of Silverado Trail. And yeah, if you're watching this video and you come here because of it, please don't get up there and kill yourself by digging pits in. You know, you could stop and fill a bucket safely just right here. This is all obsidian, and the best stuff around that I know for napping, because it's so pure, And yeah, so I wanted to tell you about Glass Mountain and show you Glass Mountain in this video. And we'll try and get onto some of those permissions again and see some of these. There's areas, because it was just gone over and gone over and gone over for 10,000 years, where there are feet of just tailings piles, just feet of where it's already been chipped up by another human being sometime over the millennia, and they had the ability to just take the most perfect pieces, so you get a high amount of toss downs, because you could just work a piece until you didn't like it and throw it down because there was so many others laying next to it. And then somebody else might come by and pick up that same piece 5 days later, 5,000 years later, and knock on it for a little bit. And pits that were exposing down to the cores and the good sections might have been, that's where people tend to dig, is where other humans have dug. So, this is just right off the road, and you're already seeing things that look like they've been gone over. Remember, when you're finding them in this situation, you're finding things that did not smash together in a river. So that's one thing I want you to keep in mind. There's the natural outside, and that's how they're created and how they sit. And then there's all of this. Now in a riverbed, you can't really prove that that was because somebody knocked it apart, but here you basically can, because they're sitting in situ on slope where they've been, with evidence of working all over them and stuff. So very dynamic pile of material, let's say that. And remember, that's what is roadside right now, would have been pathside and riverside at one time. And, the river has meandered over here in the ages. So, stories that I feel like we should start going ahead and telling, because I've spent a lot of years trying to tell a lot of people a lot of these things, and now I have the chance. So I realized that, and I thought I'd start showing you some rock there. Yep. Just 10,000 years of the natural stone being broken. There again is the natural rind of it. And then, it looks like it's going to be developed now, so there'll be houses and stuff on top of it. But I needed to show you this, because they literally dug in. Like I said, you find huge raw borders of the stuff in the hillsides, and then here you can see that it is just a billion chips. This is human beings just chipping and chipping away, looking for the perfect piece, when you have a supply that is just mountains deep. So I had collected, when I was here tending the land and stuff, with permission, but now I see that everything has changed. So, but that's the degree of it. And as I would work along, you could see just actual, almost completely developed shapes laying there. Just entire layers. It's all obsidian. I put all of this side by side. Number one, I wanted to show you the contrast. You see the grayish looking ones here and then the shiny looking ones here. So these gray ones are the ones that have been through the river. Even when they're semi-fresh, having fallen out of a bank or field, they instantly start to get a little buffing to them, and you can tell that they've been in the water. So you can see none of these have ever been in the water. These are all razor sharp fractures. Now some stones in some places break apart through weathering and snow, ice, wind, weather. That's literally how mountains are torn down. I'm aware of that. Very few forces will act upon a silicate boulder looking much like this. That's why I went ahead and brought it home. These are the big pieces coming out of there. There's piles of this. These are all the native pieces here, meaning unaffected, unbroken. So that's what the surface of obsidian looks like. Oftentimes in this area, that's how the mountain is. It is a mountain of tuff and of this sort of shape. There are also these that are really clean on the outside, but they still have a very natural look to them. And I can't say that that isn't a core from some huger thing that's been worked down. As locals, we were also told that there was huge fires on the mountain, and they would put the boulders in there and then use water to explode them, and all sorts of stories like that. So water techniques could be part of it all too. This is how natural break occurs. So it can naturally pop apart. You can find big boulders and it has fractures in it, and in those fractures, you know, they can easily pop apart. That's pretty much what happened there. And so that's what that looks like. Okay, this is a mountain. We're probably going to have to go back to a couple of these sites. I've been on different properties over the years. I've lived in the area my whole life, so I know the zones where it is just the chip piles, and they can be, I'm not exaggerating, 20 to 30 feet deep. And that is because, like I said before, we are literally, it is the mountain of volcanic glass that's within sight of the San Francisco Bay, and it always has been. So I will assert that each one of these pieces that you're seeing is a piece that's been affected by human beings. This is not, water has not done this, gravity has not done this, no erosive forces or wasting of any sort has done this, water and fissures turning into ice has not done this. This was human beings that made this mountain of stuff. For people who have worked with this material, you know, that can be obvious because, well, because nature just doesn't do this by itself without having a bunch of other rocks bashing together. There are massive toss downs. Now stick with me, because like I said, I had a chance to tend some of these properties and had permission to pick things up and all that. And but this is what I wanted to show you today. It is a mountain of blanks. Now in a setting that has this much material, you can imagine that the second that something went crooked, they just threw it down. But to somebody else of lesser skill, or that was practicing or thought that they might be able to fix it, they might pick it up 10 days later, 1,000 days later, 1,000 years later, because it was always sitting there, and work it some more. So you have these pieces that you can see that would have been perfect blades. You know, they're like, oh, good natural shape, but had flaws in it, so they gave it up. Because some things that look like tools are not tools, but that's why I'm trying to give you the context of where this is and what you're looking at, and I want you to logically go through the course of thoughts and deduction. It's elementary, you know, and think about their location and their situ, and realize that, yeah, this is probably human beings that have then the force that acted upon all these, that made all of these little things, there isn't, I know it's, you know, you hear about earthquakes in California, but there aren't that many earthquakes that shook all these rocks together and smashed all of these little discs out of everything. And there's 10,000 rocks just in that one, what we'll call a manufacturing site or a quarry, and that look like that are just your basic roughs, and you can see that they're just like, oh, nah, okay, you know what, ugh. Okay, as promised. I was looking these up. We'll do that in another video. Hopefully you guys want me to do more of these videos. My dad got me this book. It's the same book that Rox Cousteau uses, that a lot of arrowhead hunters out in the Midwest use. This has all kinds of different shapes in there for identifying in eras. So that's going to be a good tool. This entire case is from Glass Mountain, from several different properties, but from the same sort of situation, basically. The twins, the same zones as all of this, and these are ones that I gathered when I had way more time to pick through everything. So you can start to see. And again, for people who have seen these in my layout videos where I laid out my whole collection, I'm not trying to replay anything. I'm just wanting to tie in so that we can tell the story. So that's part of the reason why you save stuff in drawers, is so you can compare to the new finds. You see a whole perfect spear tip coming out there, worked all the way across the back, and then something went catastrophically wrong with the grain and it got tossed down. All of these, for some reason, I mean, you know, some people were picky, because look at that thing. You see where they were working the last of the natural rind off of there? This is, remember, this is from the same site. This is not down in the river. This is up in the manufacturing site. This is laying amongst all of these and all of this, just so you can get the picture, are these, every 100th stone. So you can see what that mountain is actually made out of. And that's what's up there all over the place. You can see where they got all the way through that. All the way through. And that broke on because, you know, this is literally a chance to look at the methodology of so much of the tool making, you know. But some of these things, boom, just didn't like that. It was curved and literally then decided to just toss that down. So all of these, they're the tailings, and then all the toss downs amongst it, and in layers so deep that it could be dug forever. The whole thing is privately owned, and in this valley in the last 30 years, every property that I knew has either burnt or changed hands, or just everything has changed. So there are very few people that I know that actually live on that mountain, and back in the day it was a place that you could wander more freely, and now it's very developed, and as you saw in the video, it has had massive changes in the last few years. But and also I respect people's private property rights, so I don't ever want to give too many secrets away or whatever, but I feel like truth needs to be told, because as far as California and this coast goes, it's got to be one of the most well-known sites among all the locals of like mid-central California, but at the same time just totally unrecognized. And a lot of times people are just fascinated by this, and I don't think that are understanding what they're seeing, you know, that these things don't just pop out of the volcano in broken up pieces like that. And then it wasn't until I had lived, I think I was 37 years old or something at that point, maybe younger, and literally got to work some properties and was like, uh-oh, you know, there are There are arrowheads all over this thing, mixed in with this. Actually, the first time that I realized that I was 16 years old, but I went up there and I gathered up a bucket of pieces. I was going to use them in a pond or something that I was building, and randomly in that bucket I found 3 toss downs, and I could never find that particular spot where I had stopped again. But later on, when I found another spot, I realized that probably every dent on that mountain that isn't a current human-made dent was a prehistoric dent, we could call it, a quarry. So I'm putting them in there so you can get an idea of what it feels like to be the person who's like digging through the mountainside up there and realizing what you're looking at. You wonder how far it traded. Look at these knives. These were just toss downs, literally all over in that quarry because they had issues. And again, these were all gathered off of places that were not public property. So these are all legal gather, and it's had bulldozers run over it since. There's literally probably in the next 5 years, half of that mountain will have vineyards on top of it. So that's part of the reason why we should look at some of the details now. And we have some of these vineyards that we got permission to look through, and ditches that we can walk and things that we can do. So I think that we're going to go ahead and wrap this video up because I'm just rambling and rambling and rambling now. But I never sell any arrowheads. I've never sold any arrowheads. My collection was started by my parents, and they're never taken from places. I'd never dig up a site. I wouldn't do things like that. These are always from places that are in a very dynamic zone where they're going to get ruined. My dad was literally a tractor driver, and was trying to save them from his own tiller blades and stuff as he was working the vineyards, which covered the entire bottom of every valley in California. And this was me trying to, I said, as long as I don't ever slow down while I'm working, can I fill my pockets? And so that was the deal. And on this particular tray, this was about 4 days gathering these as I scurried along doing my job. And a lot of these are half starts. What I set there are some of the best. And if you work this stuff, then you probably can see the issues that they ran into on steepness and stuff. But just remember, everybody had to start at some age, and they all went up there. And okay, so think about that. Let your brains chew on that. Hopefully I've shown you something that you haven't seen before. For the locals, you're going, yep, we knew about that. And yeah, just trying to tiptoe through all of the delicate nuances of this sort of thing and fill in the history, because one of the worst things that's happened has been the very purposeful erasing of history. And so sometimes when discourage however they can showing certain details, I feel like, no, maybe that's part of the same sort of thing going on where history isn't getting told, and it's being lost. So as I sit there and I weigh the balance back and forth in my head, I've come to this conclusion that we should definitely save every bit of information that we can and keep it current. And one final note on that, I'm only calling it history because it's things from the not immediate present. I would never refer to any of the indigenous peoples, First Nation peoples of this land as history, because you're definitely still current. You exist, you're alive. I hear you and I see you. And so just trying to help preserve the information and not let it be lost. So that is the goal. That's always the goal for the quest for details. Hope that I've done everybody right. Until next time, please take care of yourselves, and if you get a chance, take care of each other. I'll see you on another spot doing something else. Something like that over there. I don't know. But until then, quest on.